Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. Hip, hip, hooray, Lisa Murphy is here.
Yay!
It's been so long since we recorded together, man. You've been busy.
I know. I'm getting ready to leave again in the morning.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I was like, oh, look, I got a little accustomed to not being at an airport. And then I was like, oh, curses. Not that I mind, but it's like, oh, shoot. I wasn't planning on having to go get the tubs and gear up and get ready for tomorrow. It kind of had slipped my mind.
Yeah.
So after we chat today, then I'll go gear up for the next 10 days out.
Gee, Merry Christmas. Well, thanks for spending part of that time.
Anytime.
Yay. So I'm recording from my work office today. I don't have any of my toys. So hopefully that doesn't
from some of mine.
Yeah, I don't have any of my microphone and my headphones, but I keep telling people those are just dramatic play props. I don't know how they impact the actual.
Yeah, but do you feel like you're not doing it right because you don't have them?
Yeah, it feels weird. So anyway, if there's sound issues, I guess is what I was getting at.
Yeah, that's not, you sound fine.
Anything. Okay, so Lisa and I are going to talk about, it's not a quote this time, it's more of an anecdote. So we were already halfway through the podcast and I was like, no, we have to hit record.
Save it for the pod.
Yeah. So I am teaching this semester a curriculum in early childhood class. And so every week we have a different developmental area kind of that we talk about. So this week it's fine motor stuff. And every week I either give them a signed reading or a video or a podcast, and they have to do that before class and come to class with something that's either something they thought was interesting, something they want to hear more about, or a question that they have. So we were doing that with, so for this, they listened to an episode of Teaching with the Body in Mind called More Than Twiddling Fingers or something like that. And then they just watched a therapist video on YouTube about what fine motor skills are in birth, birth to 5. So anyway, everybody had their things they thought was cool. And then I got around to this one student who said, well, I guess my question is why does it matter? Are we supposed, how do we just remember all this stuff? And why does it even matter? And so that's the end of the anecdote. But I was dumbfounded kind of, because I get it is a lot of stuff to try and remember, but the question was it shocked me a little bit, and I thought, well, this could be a good conversation with Lisa. So we talked about how the more you know about how development really works, the better you can support it, and you can keep it in mind when you're setting up your environments, all that stuff. But
did you see
sticking with me?
Did you see anything shift?
No.
With her while you were doing that? Okay.
No, and honestly, I think part of the shock for me was that I get so nerdy about that stuff.
Yeah.
And so one of the other students was so excited to learn about all the different reflexive grasps, in infancy, and I was like, yeah, that's so cool. And then the next thing is, well, my question is, why does any of this matter?
Why does this matter? Why are we learning this? Well, and I think also maybe there might have been some setback because, as someone, a fellow nerd with you, it never would cross my mind to think why is this important? Mm-hmm. And so I almost wonder if there's maybe a little bit of a challenge to our own view, right? Our own lens of experiencing life and child development, that it shit, maybe it doesn't, maybe I've just convinced myself that it does.
That's kind of where my mind went. And I was like, how could you, Heather? How could you go there?
Yeah, maybe I should have asked that 30 years ago. Yeah. Why does any of it matter? Although it probably never would have crossed my mind, because to me, I think it just
all matters to me.
It all matters. And it makes sense that as a practitioner in a profession that you would maybe not memorize all of the minutia. Yeah. That would be impossible. But having a general working knowledge of the main key, what things that are informing your work.
Yeah. And so I read over the summer, I read a book called Geeky Pedagogy. That's the intended audience is college teachers. Oh, hello, Kane.
The first time in months are literally like doing the hedges right in front of my window.
Oh,
So I apologize for that.
that's okay. Yeah.
I saw him approaching and I was like, what are we doing today, guys?
Kane's on it. Don't worry.
Kane is on.
Anyway, the whole idea of the book is that some of us are so passionate about our topic that we teach that we lose new students because we just go on into the, every possible thing you could want to learn about this. And I do think that's one of the things as a teacher that I have to reel back a little bit. They don't need to know every possible consideration about this today.
Well, and that's actually bringing up a memory that I haven't thought of in forever. I think it was at my second workshop I ever did, ever. And my ex-husband, of course, was at all the gigs, when we were all together. And I was getting like that. Somebody was asking about Play-Doh and I was going off on this tangent. Tom stood up from the back of the room and said, turn your heat down. Right? We go 1,000 miles. We missed the point because we were thinking too hard about it. But I could see why we would perhaps unintentionally.
That did roll through my mind, but this really was basic. The podcast, of course, with Mike and his co-hosts, connected it all back to just the whole body. Like you don't have fine motor without the whole body.
The large motor, sure.
Which was just sort of like, I try to give them something that's gonna maybe throw them a little bit that we can then talk about. But the video that she was talking about was just basic stuff. So, I said, maybe you don't remember every single detail, but you may be out doing the work someday and think, oh yeah, there's something about fine motor that I need to get back in touch with, or I need to freshen my.
Well, I also think too, that if you have a working knowledge, a working understanding, especially with the large motor linked to the fine motor, right? That this obviously is going to come before this.
Yeah.
I think it assists practitioners, whether they're new or experienced, in remembering that if you're asking for them to be doing something outside of where they are developmentally, that it's not that the kid's not wanting to maybe comply with your request,
right?
But it's just that right now, developmentally where I am, I'm just not physically going to be able to do that. So you would want a working knowledge of how large leads to fine, especially if you're working with 2s or 3s, and maybe somebody, because you are new, somebody on staff is like, no, these kids have to start writing or they have to start You now are coming from albeit new, a more informed place of being able to push back in a way that is a little bit maybe more professional sounding than just, I don't like this.
Yeah. I think about it too. It comes up too in the literacy class that I teach here, where
the literacy,
emerging literacy. So we talk about the foundational stuff, phonological awareness and vocabulary and, all the foundational stuff, symbolic thinking that needs to happen before we can expect them to, quote unquote, learn to read. And so it'll come up in that class too, where they're like, this is a lot to keep in mind. Well, yeah, it is. That's why you're here. That's the special expertise we say that we need to have if we're going to call ourselves a profession, is we need to have this.
So I can't help but think that have you had the why do you want to do this work conversation with this particular crop of young students?
I mean, that's usually early in the semester I ask, what is it that made you choose this major, or what is it you want to do? And so I get that there's just wondering if some element of them not knowing what all it entails when they decide that's what they want to do.
And are they for maybe the first time coming face to face with the fact that this isn't just going to be sitting in a room with a handful of children, everybody having a good time all day, which, there is of course some truth to that, but that's not going to sustain you.
Right. But it's so when I thought about this for a topic for you and I was trying to think about how it could be broader than just a college class. And really it's anyone who sort of is resistant to professional development requirements.
Totally. Does this count?
Yeah. So what, I just wanted an opportunity to talk through.
Well,
how do we
I wanted to give a shout out
Yeah.
initially to, and then I'll circle back to this,
Yeah.
to Rusty Keeler in his book, the Risky Playbook that came out
Mhm.
about 2 years ago, I think it was. He made a comment in there, which I've totally stolen, which is that it's not extra work. Oh my God, this is so much extra work. And he says, it's not extra work. It is the work.
Right.
This is it. This is what you signed up for.
Yeah. That's
And
very
so,
concise.
I'm not going to say that you have to memorize it, but I want you to be informed with your work.
Right.
And I think with the adults who've been in the profession, unfortunately, and I had a conversation actually yesterday with somebody about how you can't make them want it. You
Right.
can't make them want it. And the advantage, I think, maybe with the college students is that maybe the light switch is on and they're like, you know what, maybe this isn't my jam.
Mhm.
And, with all due respect to your students and anybody thinking about it, is like, I'd rather have you take a couple classes and realize that you need to be somewhere else
Yeah.
than to be like, well, I started something. And then 5 years later, you're now working at a childcare center. And now you are that person who
Right.
doesn't like going to staff meetings and doesn't want to go to professional development. And, then you become that dead weight
Yeah.
that oftentimes, unfortunately, brings a lot of resentment, I think, between staff, and a lot of animosity is,
Right.
just like, why are you here? Why
And
would you
burnout.
want to not be happy?
Right. I mean, for me, and I think about it, I think, there was a point where I didn't know a lot of this
Sure.
foundational development stuff. Of course, I was in the work for 20 years before I, went back to college for anything, but certainly for the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't know that there was anything beyond just liking it and being there and having sort of an instinctive talent for it, or an instinctive isn't the word, but anyway,
Yeah.
but then once I started to be introduced to the depth and the things you need to know under the surface kind of stuff, it was so much more interesting. And it seems to me like if you're not curious
I was going to say curious.
about that kind of stuff, that the job would get so boring and it would feel so hard all the time, and I would burn out so much faster than when I can pull out these little moments of interest and intrigue.
Well, it's reminding me
which
of,
is great.
I had Serena in my family childcare, and Serena loved to play with the glue. And
Uh-huh.
if it was a Serena day, which was like maybe 3-4 times a week, we always brought this one table outside and we just put all the glue bottles outside because just Serena just loved the glue. And for me to kind of piggyback and mirror what you've just said, like there was one day where she was squirting the glue on the table, which is Serena.
Sure.
Then she
Yeah.
put it on her hand,
Mhm.
and then she stood up. She put some on her foot. She squeezed it so it fell down on top of her foot. And then she lifted up her foot and went on the patio.
Uh-huh.
And so because my journey to the depth had already started, I was
Yeah.
like, what is she thinking? Right. not what is she thinking, but like, what did
Right.
she think? And then she put the glue on the patio and put her foot in the glue and looked at me and said, ha. And I was like, she knows what glue is supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
But because I was knowledgeable about that problem solving and the cognitive and the literal versus, figuring it out and not quite abstract yet. But I was able to make room for that
Yeah.
because I knew that there was more under the
Yeah.
surface, even though at first I didn't know. And really, I mean, that's going to get uber existential, but we never know. We don't know
Right.
what's going on
Yes.
in their head. We can maybe take a good guess
Right.
based on what we know and where we are. But, to think that we actually know what's going on in their brain
Right.
isn't.
Yeah, I've really been trying to switch my language too when I'm talking about this. Like, instead of saying this is what they're learning, I'm like, this is what they could be practicing. This is what I wonder if it's happening when I see this. But
Well, and I think just that curiosity, the thirst to know more, not
Mhm.
because I want to be an encyclopedia.
Mhm.
And a perfect real-time example. Okay, so and some of your listeners, because we all cross-fertilize.
Yeah.
So some of your people know that I've been in the play therapy class, and then I've been in the play work class. And with this week I had off, I was like, please please advance me a couple modules so I can get them, so I can cut up a little bit. Well, and the module that I'm working on right now for the pop-up is about disabled children and inclusive and oh my gosh, just when you kind of think you got a handle on something, this whole world, this whole new chapter. In fact, I was texting my cuber. I'm like, oh my God.
I was just going to say his new book is going to toss so many people back.
Well, I pulled the new book and I emailed right to the because we had advanced copies of the book.
Yes, it's not out yet. Sorry, kids.
Don't freak out, anybody. It's not available yet. But I emailed right away to the coordinators. I'm like, this book needs to be on your all's radar for this particular module. And so of course, me, like you, I did the readings they required, but then that led to a rabbit hole of a rabbit hole of a rabbit hole. And, now on the kitchen table, there's 4 like 30-40 page PDFs of what it really means, and just some of the stuff that you just never stop to think about. Right. That doesn't mean that you now have to go be an expert in disabilities and how to make playgrounds and parks accessible and all of that, but it's knowledge now in my tool belt. So if I am in a situation or a scenario, I just feel like it's one more piece of the pie that I have a little bit of a touch point on, or something to refer to people to. And that's how I've always seen. I know I'm getting you off topic and I apologize for that, but I feel that my job is almost to be like a conduit. My job is to share what I know, and then to be able to connect people to what they need maybe more of, that I might or might not be able to speak to, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some things I can just riff on for hours about without any notes. And then there's other things it's like, oh, let me go back and review that. I mean, that's what all these are, right? Those are all
exactly
my binder. Here's my binder back there. And I think the knowledge that we get, whether it's something that we learn at a college class that then sparks an interest, whether it's knowledge that then makes us go, this isn't really calling to me the way that maybe I thought it was, right? So I find something else. I mean, that's why it matters, because you're either going to find that you're hungry for more of this, or maybe that you're not as hungry for it as you were maybe hoping.
Yeah. Well, one thing I did think about was, when people plan an activity to do with a group of children, and they plan it and they've got half hours scheduled on the schedule, but it takes 4 minutes to finish the activity. In that case, I think, for example, we were talking about fine motor, and puzzles were listed as one of the things you could do for fine motor. So I was talking to them because they have to then go on and plan something and go do it with a group of 3 or 4 children. And so I said, don't plan puzzles. Look at a puzzle and think about all these verbs that we just saw on the list of fine motor things, fine motor verbs or whatever. And then look at this puzzle and think, it's really this. And that's if that'll be valuable for the people who are watching, but not so much for the people who are just listening. But to really, it gives you a filter when you're planning to think about,
true,
how engaging will this really be? Or is this just going to be, okay, I put those 5 pieces in the puzzle and now I'm done. So I want to go, to the next thing. And that was, I think that might have been a little bit of a connection when we got into that. But I was trying to think of, okay, in what kind of real life in your job working with children scenarios can I come up with that say, well, this is why it's important to know about the different, in that specific situation, it was more, we were talking about infants and their reflexes and the grasps and that kind of thing, which one student thought was really cool. And then this one was like, I don't know why that matters. And maybe with infant grasping, it's less, but just in general, as we were talking about the whole fine motor. But I think it's also so important to our, if we want to see children as competent and capable, instead of just saying, well, they can't do scissors yet, so they're deficient, and I'm going to mark that off on the milestone list. We see all the stuff they can do when we look at the whole big picture of what fine motor skills might look like.
I'm wondering if it was specific, if the comment maybe was specific to that particular topic. Like, I would be curious to see if that same mindset bubbles up in
Yeah.
other courses.
Yeah.
If that
Well,
makes-
she said, yeah, she did say, it just seems like a lot to have to remember. Which when you're in learner mode, sure, it does. It was more my reaction to it and my sort of lack of immediate response that made it stick in my head for, days now.
Let me text Lisa.
Yeah. So one of the things we talked about before I hit record was, there's a lot of comparisons when we're trying to say,
yeah.
are we a profession? Are we not a profession? Are we an industry? Are we a field? What are we? And people want to connect us to the medical field. That comparison is always made. And while I don't buy that as a apples to apples kind of comparison, I just can't imagine a student in a nursing class, and you heard me say this already, saying, why does any of this matter? Like, it's a lot to remember.
It is.
And I feel, I don't know, I feel like it's equally important. Maybe their life isn't on the line, but they're, that's what we're here for, is to understand what they are currently doing and working on and deserve. And then how do I support that? What kind of skills do I need? What kind of specific knowledge do I need to be able to do that really well? Because it's easy to go in with your template, your box curriculum and your daily schedule that you always stick to. But to think about it in these different sort of deeper ways, I think is a little more complex for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sort of just,
I'm having a memory of one time, I think we podcasted where you were, or so we were doing something and you were talking about why it was important to be familiar with some of the theorists, right?
Yeah.
And how do you start into almost flipping it, instead of saying, here's what Montessori is known for.
Uh-huh.
I'm oh, sorry, I thought you already started up again.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how you wanted to identify the behavior first. What are you actually seeing? And then link it back.
Right. We were looking at a list from Carol Garhart Mooney's Theories of Practice, where she was listing behaviors that she overheard teachers talking about. Yeah, like a 2-year-old, she's such a bully, and a 6-month-old, you pick her up now, she's going to want to pick her up every time. Yeah. That's what we were doing. And we were going to go backwards and connect it to how a knowledge of theory could have helped that teacher in the moment.
Exactly. And so I think I particularly like this episode because I'm not like prepared, like it was really kind of last minute and just like, come on, let's talk about this. And I think in real time now, just 20 minutes in, I think it's because we will do better work when we know better stuff, right? So in order to be the best that I can possibly be, I'm going to have to go out and learn stuff. And some of it might be, boring, some people might think that, and some people initially might like the recipes and the activities and the art projects, and the other stuff seems kind of like, and I get that. But I think at some point we realize that, specifically what, talking about the development, cognitive language literacy, physical and social emotional and stuff, at some point you got to venture into the other realms and maybe see what you've been missing.
Yeah.
Because it is going to allow us to be better at our job. So I think really, I mean, we could probably use 1,000 words to say that same thing, but I think for me, that's why it's important, because it allows you to be better at your job.
Right. So this afternoon in class, half of them are making homemade Play-Doh and the other half are doing tally marks of how often they use their shoulders, their wrists, their elbows, their fingers, and also how many, the list of verbs, the poking, squeezing, grasping, pinching, whatever, the list of verbs. They have to do little tick marks whenever they see the other group do it in their Play-Doh making
activity.
It's going to be fun.
Shoulders.
Yeah, it all starts, up there.
So they're
That's
bringing
what
it,
Mike said on his podcast anyway.
they've they've made the Play-Doh already, and then they're going to come in and play with the Play-Doh.
No, they're making the Play-Doh and then
So while
playing
they're
with it.
making the Play-Doh, we're going to be tick marking. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Are they
yeah.
each making their own batch? Or are they
Well,
working
half
together?
of them are making, yep, and half of them are watching. Then we're gonna do the same thing, switch them and watch them build.
No. I meant how many people are in the class?
Oh, 10 in this class.
So are 5 going to be making 5 different batches of Play-Doh? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And then switching out and building with blocks and doing the same thing.
Ooh, I like that.
So it's gonna be fun. And of course, we'll have a chance then I will have a chance to talk about, why this is important while they're doing those kinds of things.
Well,
And
even being an
connect them.
advocate for play, that's a reason why it's important. An
Yep.
advocate for just making sure that our programs do stay true to best practice when we're talking to maybe parents or others
Yeah.
who might have their own perceived notions of what preschool should look like, and maybe
Yeah.
it's not quite in line with what it should be looking for. And and quite honestly, and it's going to sound really direct, but you're not going to have a leg to stand on if you don't know what you're talking about, and you're
For
going to
sure.
turn into a you're going to just bend over for the biggest, most blustery breeze that walks in who says, I
Mhm.
don't like this, and you're going to say okay, because
Yeah.
you're not confident because you're not informed.
Yeah.
But if you're more informed, even though it might make you nervous to talk back, at least you're able to talk
Yeah.
back.
And even if you don't have it specifically memorized, you know that it's there and you can find it again. You can be like, okay,
Exactly.
oh, we talked about why, thinking about shoulder movements is important for fine motor skills, but I don't remember what it was exactly. And
But at least I know it exists and I can go back and find it, right? And there's these, what does Jeff say? And we have these amazing computers that we have access to
in our
on a daily
pockets.
basis.
Yes.
And I've even said that in workshops too, is that, back in the day, depending on how old you are, and I'm older, I'll be 53 next month. Oh my God.
I'll be 52 tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Happy birthday to us.
Thanks.
52 is great. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I've liked them all so far. So
yeah, good. Yeah, 52 was a good one. But I would say, for me, there was a time before I changed schools, my early grades, it was memorize and regurgitate and memorize and regurgitate. So good school was getting good grades because you could regurgitate what somebody poured into your head. Now the recall, nobody's going to test you on that recall. Mm-hmm. If you know that it exists, you can go to your laptop. Maybe it does exist in your head, sure. And good for you if it does.
Right.
But if not, but if you don't even know that it exists, it doesn't matter how many tools, books, access you have. None of that matters at all, because you don't even know that there's something to go and look for. Mm-hmm. And so that knowledge is power. Knowledge is power, and it has been.
Yeah. The connection I didn't make that just came to me now is last week I had them read an article from Exchange that Francis Wardle wrote called Guerrilla Teaching Tactics that you might have
we've read that
part
one.
of a recording on that one.
Yeah.
And its audience too is for college instructors, but the message is what we teach is most likely, if we're teaching developmentally appropriate stuff, most likely very different from what we send them out to. And we need to have them prepared for that difference and practice using critical thinking. And so it could be tied to that too, right? Like we know they're going out into places that maybe aren't appropriate. And so if they have this foundational information, they'll be able to recognize that. So it contributes to their critical thinking as they go out to be teachers. And
dude, that could be happening in all my gigs.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going, well, why does this matter? It's not what I'm going to be allowed to do on Monday. Yeah. My mind is not going to be allowed to shift if I stay employed at this particular spot. So why does this matter? Mm-hmm. Good point. And because you're not always going to be here, because someday you're going to wake up and smell the coffee and be like, I need to find somewhere else to be.
Right. And maybe it prevents you from developing sort of bad habits while you're waiting to get to that place that lets you do what you want to do. I keep telling people, not so much in class, because right now none of them are working in early childhood settings, but just like I've said it in podcasts and I've said it to people in person. It's like no one's getting fired in childcare right now anyway. They can't get enough teachers in to serve the families who need it. So
Yeah, I've said
here's our
that too
time.
myself.
Here's our
Take
time.
advantage. Take advantage of it. Close the door and let them play. Done. What are they gonna do? Fire you?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
7 other places are hiring. So
Right. Yeah, we really shouldn't be laughing at that, but
I know. You have to though, right?
you laugh to keep from crying.
Exactly. It's messy. I was trying to think if there was anything else we said before we started recording that we need to go back to.
Well, I said the two things I wanted to throw out. Yeah. But so are we in agreement that it does matter? It might matter for different reasons. It might matter. The reasons behind why it matters might evolve as your work evolves.
Yeah.
Like right now, let's be honest, right now, maybe it matters because it is going to be on the test. And maybe right now that's where I have to meet you.
Yeah.
And it's going to matter when you're not with me anymore, because at some point you're going to see it all panning out when you're hanging out with that group of children.
Yeah.
And then maybe a little further on in more of an advocacy role,
Yeah.
so
well, so they're also doing observations on each area before they have to do a plan. So they've got a, assigned field experience placement, and they're out there.
How's that for you? How are you the one able to choose where they go?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
But they have like a little guided checklist of things they could look for. It's not the only thing. And so after the first one, they said, what if I don't see any of that? It's like, well, then you reflect about it and you think, how would I do it so that this was implemented and so that this was included? And
then let me know so I take them off the list.
No, but I just think it all goes to curiosity, being if we're going to be a curious early childhood practitioner, if we're going to be able to engage in critical thinking to determine whether something is, really effectively supporting play and development and learning and all of that, the appropriate, age appropriate kind of learning, or am I just going through the motions and looking at the surface sort of activities or things, and if they aren't able to do that, then I just chalk it up as a deficit in the child.
I think the curiosity piece is probably more valuable and more important than we realize.
Yeah, for sure. But again, I don't know how to, it's hard to teach curiosity,
Sure.
Whether it's college students in my class or people in your gigs, other than just saying something that's cool that maybe sparks a little curiosity and building on that. If ultimately they're just there because someone told them to be there or someone told them they had to be there, it's really hard to engage that.
I was thinking, and forgive me on the spot, I'm forgetting her name. She's somebody who's been on the porch. She's been on the porch with us a couple times. And she was out in California. I met her on a Zoom call with a bunch of California educators. And she was saying that as a college teacher, one of her frustrations right now is that they just don't seem curious. She's like, you have the babies out there crawling around, and she's like, you don't see in their eyes like ooh, why is she doing? Oh, look what she just did. And that, and I don't know how you would even describe that, but she says that she's noticing now that it's missing, and it wasn't just one kid and one class 1 year during COVID, right? It's been happening, and she expressed concern for the profession because you need that, we need another word now at this point, like the curious episode, but just that, why did you do that? And what did they just do? And look what they're over there doing over there. Oh my God. To appreciate what's below the surface in a true, meaningful way, not in somebody said I'm supposed to watch this unfold, but to really be excited about what's unfolding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to understand. I guess that's maybe where we finish this.
Maybe we needed somebody else on here to play devil's advocate or something.
We need someone
Because we're just
pushing back,
patting each other on the back.
right. Because I've just always been, and not, it's my personality. It's not even necessarily early childhood stuff. I just get nerdy about stuff. So it is really hard for me to sort of pull back and say, okay, so that's not a trait everyone shares.
Yeah, what?
But yeah, it just that question really stuck with me. But I think, yes, we have decided, stamp it. Lisa and I say it matters.
It matters. Next.
All right. Yeah, I think we can just end it here now.
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's been a minute.
I know, so fun. And then when you did have time, I was like, oh my God, what will we talk about? So I need to prepare lists for when you are available, and I just have it right there.
Just right there.
Just go.
You don't even need to tell me. That's my favorite kind.
Yeah.
Is just tell me what we're talking about when we jump
Bring it
on.
Yeah. Perfect.
Awesome.
You say that, but I've seen you come prepared. I've seen you come with your
saying
studies.
if you don't tell me, if you don't know what the topic is, that I think is that's sometimes my favorite, is just what immediately comes to the head. Yeah.
All right. So people can just send in their ideas for what they want to hear you talk about when you're on this show. Make a list.
That'd be awesome.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
Fire a bunch of them out.
Everybody for listening.
Bye.